what's been happening at Maitland Local Court this week. According to the court list, there were 120 people listed to appear, but I can't find any police media releases or newspaper stories about any of the cases. Of course, this week there was the Christmas Day guy, which is the case I'm following for my Christmas at the Local Court series. I waited about 2 hours only for it to get adjourned because he didn't show up. However, I ended up discovering another Christmas case which involved a manhole, a gun and a single bullet. I also discovered there were heaps of cases this week that the community might benefit from knowing about. For example, this week there was a guy who was charged with riding a motorbike without a helmet over at Rutherford after he was caught unlicensed on the unregistered motorbike while actually wearing a helmet. You had to be listening carefully to hear how the helmet he was wearing and bought at a motorbike shop didn't meet Australian standards. But did the court consider his 2023 burnout conviction when sentencing him for the motorbike offence? Talking burnouts, what about the guy that did 3 burnouts in one day? What was he sentenced to this week? We heard he almost lost control and crashed into cars and people. While one of his other burnouts, the court was told people climbed onto the car while he maintained the burnout. This week, observing from the courtroom gallery, we learnt that the drug court doesn't have jurisdiction to deal with Commonwealth offences. I didn't know that. Anyways, that particular case will stay here at Maitland Local Court. We learnt that injuring your groin playing cricket is not an excuse for high-range drink driving. There was also a guy who was frustrated and affected by alcohol, and so decided to make a visit to some people to recover money owed to him. Pulling at their front gate, he managed to break the gate motor and therefore was charged with malicious damage. So what did he get sentenced to? What about the woman convicted of common assault after punching a guy at a licensed premises? There was discussion during her sentencing on the community's expectations about violence in and around licensed venues. So in my opinion, I think informing the community about how the court dealt with this case would be useful. However, there's no public information about this case. There's no police media releases or newspaper stories. When a drug driver appeared, we discovered that the Merit program isn't taking any referrals at the moment. I have no idea why. Turns out the defendant is attempting to get treatment and the magistrate is very keen to know more. The case was adjourned to allow the defendant to get some evidence about his treatment to inform the magistrate when he returns to be sentenced. I think a case like this has the potential to end up as a New South Wales Local Court high five moment. Not that the magistrates do high fives. But the court is full of what feels like never-ending cases. There's a lot of reoffending. There's a lot of alcohol-fueled violence. But sometimes there are little moments where it looks like someone is beating meth and may get to ride off into the sunset away from the world that is the local court. And with no Merit program available at the moment, it looks like this defendant is going to have to organise the treatment themselves. I reckon if he stays off meth and doesn't return to the local court, that defendant deserves a high five. So I couldn't find stories about this week's cases, but there were 2 media stories about cases heading to Maitland Local Court in the near future. First incoming case is from last Friday when media broadcast a ute on a residential street in Woodbury ramming into another car. There's no backstory, it's just footage of a 1-car smash-up type derby in a street. A little while later, the media reported that a woman was charged with road rage type offences and will appear here in late April. The second case relates to one of the 3 barbers from Green Hills who were arrested way back in October 2023. Well, 2 of the 3 entered pleas for organised crime this week at Newcastle Local Court. It looks like the 2 still bail refused will stay in Newcastle, maybe with a possible sentence in the District Court. But the 3rd, who has now been bailed, will return to Maitland for sentencing in May. They started their legal journey here as fresh custodies, and the cases have been going through the motions since 2003 in Newcastle. The media usually follow these organised crime cases, so we'll likely see published details. Whereas I prefer the disorganised crimes of Maitland, so I will continue to follow the petty crimes. And there's heaps of petty crimes happening at Maitland Local Court every week, but there's very little public information available. I would argue more public information about cases at Maitland Local Court should be released to assist in general deterrence and to inform us about how the law is being applied here in Maitland.